Following the bitterly contested 25th Republican National Convention, which saw General Eisenhower win over Senator Taft on the first ballot, a tumultuous convention greets the nomination of the general who's become Mr. Eisenhower. With his running mate, Richard Nixon, he'll face Democrat Adlai Stevenson in the November election. At the United Nations General Assembly, a UN official walks in almost unnoticed. He's Dr. Ralph Bunche, who only a few hours before was announced winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. The first Negro to win the award, he is warmly congratulated by friends. The Supreme Court of the United States will hear cases from 5 states to decide whether school segregation is legal. The South Carolina case was filed by 62 parents in Clarendon County. South Carolina Governor James F. Burns announced that the nation's foremost trial lawyer, John W. Davis, would argue the case before the Supreme Court.
Hello, Legal Defense Fund. I'll ring. Mr. Hill is handling the Virginia case.
Students and how long have they been? He says.
I'll tell Bob Carter. Yeah.
Legal Defense Fund. I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh is not taking any calls.
Why, Mr. Davis, how good to see you.
Morning.
Here, this will help you sleep. John W. Davis.
A lawyer's lawyer. In law school, I used to cut classes, take the bus over to the Supreme Court and watch him. He was the greatest Solicitor General we ever had. I used to sit there and say to myself, will I ever? And every time I'd have to answer, no, never.
Why does a man of his stature take their side?
The man has lived with the law for 50 years. He must believe those fellas at the Supreme Court will see it his way.
Well, you know what I think? I think you're the best lawyer in America. And that Carter, Greenberg, and Hill are not far behind.
Well, we'll find out soon enough. Will Dr. Levitt let you travel?
I'll be there. He said 1 more week of treatments, then I can travel. I'll press this and get the spots out. You got to get some new clothes. I want you to look like a great lawyer, too.
Hello?
Got your message. It's J. Delane.
Can you get to Washington? I've got a seat for you at the Supreme Court.
I shall be there.
Tickets, please.
Tomorrow here in Washington, the Supreme Court will hear arguments on Brown versus Board of Education. Lawsuits in which Negro plaintiffs from 4 states and the District of Columbia are challenging the legality of school segregation. John W. Davis and Thurgood Marshall had the opposing...
The response has been terrific. We've already collected $12,000, and our people are still on the phone.
Please send it directly to our bank.
Expect even more money.
Thurgood greatly appreciate your help at a crucial time.
Some say that Felix Frankfurter is the key man on the court.
There are 9 key men. Peanut, why don't we get our new man to fill the gentleman in?
Bill Coleman clerked for Justice Frankfurter during the 1948 term. The first colored man ever chosen as clerk. He knows the justices. Bill, will you give the gentleman a sense of how the court stacks up?
Chief Justice Vinson. He plays poker 2 nights a week with President Truman. Some say he's better at setting major league batting averages than legal precedents. Vinson is a passive leader of a divided court. One result, less than half as many unanimous opinions this year as 10 years ago. Vinson relies heavily on legal precedents. He's reluctant to overturn established law. Tom Clark of Texas, conservative, votes with Vinson 90% of the time. His own state of Texas has 1,000 segregated schools. Justice Stanley Reed, Kentucky. In some ways, he's still a small-town Southern lawyer. Says he opposes discrimination against Negroes, but his solution could be equal schools, not desegregation. These 2 we can count on. William O. Douglas is the youngest member of the court, Hugo Black the oldest, the strongest defenders of individual liberties on the court. These 2 we have to work on, Jackson and Frankfurter. Robert Jackson was appointed to the court by Roosevelt in 1941. He's still upset that Truman passed him over when he made Vinson Chief Justice. Do you know what stare decisis means?
Yesterday's decision shall govern today's decision?
Exactly. Jackson believes that precedents are a force for stability. So, like a coral reef, the law becomes a structure of fossils. Felix Frankfurter, the finest intellect on the court. A Jew born in Europe. He knows discrimination. He used to say to us, how we feel is not important. It's the law that matters.
Is this Davis fellow as brilliant as his reputation?
They call him the lawyer's lawyer.
I burned your old one. Tomorrow morning, I want you looking every bit as good as Mr. John W. Davis.
South Street and New York Avenue. Watch your step.
Hello, Julia. Hello, John.
Mr. Davis, I cast my first vote for president in 1924. For you.
Well, as things turned out, that vote didn't harm anyone. Everyone who says they voted for me actually did. I'd have been president. Good luck, Marshal.
Mrs. Marshall, I'm Julia Davis, Mr. Davis's daughter.
It's nice to meet you.
I have great respect for your husband.
Thank you.
All rise. The Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Oyez, oyez, oyez. All persons having business before the Honorable, the Supreme Court of the United States are invited to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court.
Case number 101, Harry Briggs Jr. et al. Against members of trustees of School District number 22, Clarendon County, South Carolina, et al.
Counsel are present.
Mr. Marshall.
Mr. Chief Justice, may it please the court, my colleagues will address the Kansas, Delaware, Virginia, and District of Columbia cases. I will speak on behalf of Harry Briggs Jr. and the Negro children of the town of Summerton, who have raised their attack on the validity of the South Carolina Code, which reads, "It shall be unlawful for pupils of one race to attend the schools provided for persons of another race." In the lower courts, we produced unchallenged experts who testified that segregation damages the personality of Negro children and destroys their self-respect. If Ralph Bunche, this nation's distinguished ambassador to the United Nations, were assigned to South Carolina, it would be the will of the people that his children go to a Jim Crow school. No matter how great anyone becomes, if he happens to be a Negro, his children are relegated to that school. Yet this court is being asked by the defense to uphold the segregation law of South Carolina. Under our form of government, the only testing ground as to whether or not individual rights are violated by the majority is here in this, the Supreme Court of the United States. The court must weigh the rights of the Negro children against the public policy of the state of South Carolina. And if that policy violates those rights, then this court, reluctant or otherwise, is obliged to say that that policy has run up against the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees all citizens equal treatment under the law. We therefore respectfully urge that the judgment of the district court be reversed and the children's rights be affirmed.
Is it fair to say that the South Carolina legislature set up segregated schools to avoid racial friction?
Yes, sir.
Doesn't the legislature have to weigh the advantage of maintaining law and order against what might be a disadvantage to the segregated group?
I think that the legislature should, Mr. Justice Reed, but I think we have to bear in mind that, as far as I know, in these states, there is not a single Negro legislator doing the weighing. The only point before this court is the law as it was applied in Clarendon County. All we are asking is that the state-imposed racial segregation be stopped and that the county school board be instructed to work out a solution.
What kind of a solution?
They could assign children to schools on any reasonable basis.
You mean we would have gerrymandering of school districts?
Not gerrymandering, Mr. Justice Frankfurter. The new district lines would simply have to be drawn on a natural basis without regard to race or color.
It would be important to me to have you spell out exactly what would happen if this court reverses and the case goes back to South Carolina.
What is important is that we get the principle established. Segregation by race is not legal. It is impossible right now to say precisely how it will work.
I think it's important to know before one starts out where he is going.
I would like to reserve the remainder of my time.
I was watching Chief Justice Vincent very carefully. His face. I don't like the expression in his eyes. How do we do?
I think we've made a number of points very effectively.
Truth is, fellas, I wasn't very good.
Frankfurter is thorny. Hardly lets a man finish a sentence.
An experienced lawyer is prepared for that. I let myself get bogged down in detail. The one thing I wanted to do was find a way to talk about the principle, convince them that segregation is morally wrong, that there is no such thing as separate equality.
Says counsel for the plaintiff, we have the uncontradicted testimony of expert witnesses that segregation is hurtful to the children of both the colored and the white races. Now, there are experts, and there are experts. Let me read a sentence or two from W.E.B. Du Bois, the great Negro educator. I have seen wise and loving colored parents take infinite pains to force their little children into schools where the white children and white teachers despised and bullied the dark child. Now, such parents want their children to fight this thing out. But dear God, at what a cost? Dr. Du Bois concludes, we shall do better by putting the children in schools where they are wanted than by thrusting them into hells where they are ridiculed and hated. Let me come now to what is the crux of this case. That is the meaning and interpretation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Your honors have said it is your duty, and I quote, to place ourselves as nearly as possible in the condition of the men who framed the instrument. Now, what was the condition of those who framed the instrument? I will tell you. The resolution proposing the 14th Amendment was proffered by Congress in June of 1866. 1 month later, the same Congress established separate schools for the races right here in the District of Columbia. And from that good day to this, Congress has not wavered in that policy. So clearly, the Congress does not believe that the Constitution speaks against segregated schools.
What is your answer, Mr. Davis, to the suggestion that the Constitution is a living document? It must be interpreted in relation to the facts at the time it is interpreted.
My answer to that, Mr. Justice Douglas, is that changed conditions do not expand the language that the framers of the Constitution employed. And it is inconceivable that the Congress which passed the 14th Amendment would have forbidden the states to employ an educational plan which Congress itself was employing in the District of Columbia. No court, I respectfully submit, is justified in ignoring that. And over the years, this court has spoken in the most clear and unmistakable terms to the effect that segregation is not unlawful. In Plessy versus Ferguson, and in 6 subsequent cases, the doctrine of separate but equal has been upheld. So, Your Honors, I might ask, why should this be a matter of great national policy? Is it not a fact that the very strength and fiber of our federal system is local self-government? I respectfully submit there is no reason why this court or any other should reverse the findings of 90 years.
Mr. Marshall, over here, please. How will the court rule? Mr. Carter, don't be swayed, please.
Masterful job. You did us proud.
Thank you, Jim.
How do you see it?
6-3, maybe 5-4. In the language of the famous general, we've got them, and they'll never get home.
Mr. Marshall, aren't all the precedents that have been set relating to this decision?
Well, Bob, I guess it's out of our hands.
The lives and hopes of so many millions rest in the hands of those 9 men. When do you think they'll come down with a decision?
Months, not weeks. I let myself get tangled up in their questions and caught in the underbrush. Davis. He makes it sound like pages of history.
Come on, Thurgood. It's Christmas.
What about this housing case?
We'll take care of things. Don't you worry.
These people are depending on us.
Buster needs you now.
Yeah.
All these years you've been tramping in and out of southern courthouses. Now's the time you can be with her.
I'll keep in touch.
Very good. Is she gonna be okay?
She's gotta be okay.
The nation's capital, ready for its day of days, the inauguration of a new president. The dignitaries file through the Capitol Rotunda toward the portico where the transfer of the presidency will occur. Here are members of Congress. Behind them, members of the Supreme Court of the United States in judicial robes.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
Seen Justice Frankfurter? Yes, sir. Been here at least an hour. Came in at 7:30 sharp. Mr. Justice Reed, Mr. Justice Jackson.
Good morning, fellow.
Morning, sir. Here are the notes on the 14th Amendment for the Clarendon matter.
Yes, ma'am. Have the brethren assembled?
I saw Justices Reed and Jackson going up the hall. May I ask how it's going?
You may, but knowing as you do that the deliberations of the justices are privileged, you may not expect a reply. Stuck in the mud. No leadership.
The chief?
Good morning, Mr. Justice Blake, Mr. Justice Douglas, Mr. Justice Clark, Mr. Justice Reed, Mr. Justice Jackson.
It's very simple for me. The state cannot classify people by color for education.
I'm with Douglas, prepared to desegregate.
I see it differently from Black and Douglas. You have to look at the achievements of the Negro people, the remarkable progress that's been made since the deprivations of slavery till today. I believe that in time, the states, as this progress continues, will themselves lower the barrier. Meanwhile, the Plessy decision, with its separate but equal doctrine, is the law of the land. It has been for half a century. I see no compelling reason for overturning it now.
I agree with Reed. We were not appointed to this court to make the law. We're here to interpret it. I'm comfortable with the precedents before us. Doesn't stare decisis mean that the court doesn't change its mind just because some new justice has come along?
The colored children in South Carolina, Kansas, Delaware, Virginia, and the District of Columbia appealed to this court claiming that segregation denies them equal opportunity. Now, we can't wear blinders. The state segregation laws must be struck down.
I simply do not agree that the framers of the 14th Amendment intended to bar segregated schools. It doesn't say that. It says equal protection, and the schools are being equalized.
What about the Congress? It's their job to take this on and save us from becoming a 9-man school board for the entire country.
I am concerned over the effect on the country if this court should put forward a divided decision.
Felix, we have issued split decisions before, and the Republic has survived nicely.
Of course we have, but this is an explosive issue. Some governors have stated publicly that they would resist an order to desegregate. It would be a catastrophe if this court put forward a decision it can't enforce.
Perhaps Felix's warning should lead us in the direction of caution when it comes to overturning precedents which have been so continuously upheld by the court. We can move on to other matters and revisit the school cases at another time.
It just seems so clear-cut to me. Segregation is wrong, so the court votes to ban it. Bang.
Yes, Mark, a moral question. And a legal question. And what else?
Nothing else.
Wrong. It's also a political question.
The Supreme Court is above that. That's why justices have lifetime appointments.
That doesn't keep justices, some justices, from being concerned about the political effect of what they do, including this justice. If we come down with a 5-4 decision to desegregate, or if we come down with a 6-3 decision to uphold separate but equal, there will be the majority opinion and 1, 2, or 3 dissenting opinions. Judges like to put their spoon in the pie. After 6 conferences, we are still split. A divided court will send a terribly confused signal to the country. It could have massive opposition, whichever way the decision goes.
So, what happens?
You need a Kochlöffel.
What's a Kochlöffel?
A cooking spoon that stirs things up.
Now we should turn our attention to the school cases.
I do believe it is time to cut the cards and deal.
I know where I stand.
I've been thinking. The 14th Amendment is at the heart of this question. How can we be sure what the intent of the amendment is unless we know what was in the mind of the Congress that framed it in 1865 and the state legislatures that ratified it? Did they intend for it to forbid segregated schools? We are being asked to make what could be the most important judicial decision of this century, and we are doing it without all the facts. I propose that we ask counsel on both sides to come back and re-argue the case, focusing on this question. What evidence is there that the framers contemplated or did not contemplate that the 14th Amendment would abolish segregation in the public schools? With that information, we would be able to make a sound judgment.
Excellent, excellent.
Hello? Are you sure? Thanks. Re-argument.
Ivan, in, boy.
It's the New York Times. James Weston called.
Invoice, $16.23. COD.
Greenberg, this man needs $16.23. We're good for it.
Thurgood? Professor Franklin?
John Ho? What are you doing? Going back to Howard, eh? Good. You know what else you're going to be doing? You're going to be working for me. I need the best historians and constitutional scholars. The Supreme Court wants to know what those white men were thinking 100 years ago when they passed the 14th Amendment. Be on the train tonight.
Very good. Bob Ming is coming in from Chicago. He knows the 1865 debates by heart.
We don't have money for train fare for these people.
Tell them we're good for it. Alice, telegrams to all our supporters. Tell them the Supreme Court has deferred judgment. We have to re-argue the case, and we need emergency funds. Tell them you know how to word it. We need money bad.
Thurgood, when the 14th Amendment was ratified, there were 37 states.
You better research all of them.
Did you reach Henry Steele Commager?
Peanut talked to him. He's not available at Oxford for the summer. He sent this message. I greatly fear your premise is wrong. The framers of the amendment did not, as far as we know, intend that it should be used to end segregation in public schools. I strongly urge you to consider dropping that particular argument because it weakens your case. Bob, get to Horace Bond. He's the best scholar of political strategies of that time. Any of you guys know anybody who could give us money? Get to work on them. We've got bills, travel, offices, telephones. If they shut off our phones, we are out of business. And there are a lot of people who would like to see our door slammed. I'm like General Patton. The best tanks money could buy, but no gas to run them on. Can I help you? I'm Black.
You're Black?
Charles Black from Austin, Texas.
What can we do for you?
I'm here to help. I'm a professor and a lawyer, and I can write a little. They said you needed help.
Yes. They called me about you. Find the professor some sit-down space. We could use all the help we can get.
You can report to the Honorable Governor, Mr. Tully, that I have assigned two of the brightest young men of our firm to lead the research. Mr. Strait from Harvard, Mr. McPherson from Yale. But they do work together harmoniously. Mr. Marshall seems to have fallen on hard times, soliciting our partners.
Send tax-deductible gift to NAACP Legal Defense Fund, New York. Thurgood Marshall. Well, maybe we should turn Mr. Strait and Mr. McPherson here loose on their tax-deductible status.
That's not our style. Their time will be better spent in the libraries.
The Attorney General of South Carolina has asked his counterparts in 37 of the states that concern us to research their state archives at no expense to us.
The research will show that the states were determined to retain the right to shape their schools to fit their particular region. Now, the Marshall people will be looking for something specific, something that shows that Congress intended for the 14th Amendment to prohibit separate schools. But they won't find it.
Buster?
Yes, honey.
Where have you been?
Errands?
What were you doing?
I had a whole bunch of errands.
Where's your watch?
I sold it.
You can't do that.
I did it.
We've got contributors. I won't take the money.
I'll mail it in.
Buster. When they wouldn't let me into the law school at the University of Maryland, my mother went downtown to the Crown pawn shop and sold her engagement band and her wedding ring to pay for me to go to the law school at Howard.
So?
So? I don't want you selling your jewelry.
And what if your mother hadn't sold those rings? Where would you be now?
I just don't like it.
Thurgood, you once said to me that the fight for civil rights was worth a life. Remember? I can get along without a watch, but I can't get along without supper. And I want to know everything that's going on.
We've got the best professors and historians from all around the country. And thanks to Howard University and Charlie Houston, our lawyers are as good or better than the Ivy League boys. And I will have a second chance to argue this case. Like the old saying, I'm a man of peace, but I adore a riot.
Ming and I think the real key lies in the ex-Confederate states in the South. It was a condition of their rejoining the Union after the Civil War that they adopt the 14th Amendment. Congress insisted on it.
Not one of these states put a single word about school segregation in their new state constitution. Now, we believe that this proves that they understood that Jim Crow schools were outlawed by the 14th Amendment.
They had to toe the mark in order to get back into the Union.
Exactly. But some of those states turned around and put in segregated schools a year after the 14th Amendment was ratified.
And they've been operating segregated schools ever since. Professor Kelly, I'm not sure your argument holds water.
It sure doesn't.
Back to the books, boys. I'm sure if we give them a little more time, Mr. Kelly and Mr. Ming will come up with something more solid.
Professor Black, is it necessary for you to be negative so much of the time?
I'm not negative. I state facts.
I've been intending to ask you, out of all of the legal and academic opportunities before you, just why did you end up here at the Legal Defense Fund?
Well, I'll tell you. I come from deep, deep in Texas. So deep I can't even remember hearing the word Republican before I was 18 years old. But I had heard of this really terrible organization way up north called the NAACP. It was an awful place with a great big office all the way up there in New York, they said. And the worst thing of all about it was that right there in that office there was this room, a special secret room with no windows and no doors and walls about a foot thick. And the only way that you could get in was with a combination of this huge lock. And inside that room, they said there was nothing but hooks on the walls. Hundreds and hundreds of hooks. And you know what was hanging on each and every one of those hooks?
What?
Well, they said that on each of those hooks was a key to the bedroom of a Southern white woman. So I figured that is an organization I want to get involved in.
The family spokesman said the cause of death was a massive heart attack suffered at approximately 3:15 this morning at his apartment in Washington. The Chief Justice was 63 years old. Turning to baseball, the Dodgers topped the Phillies 3-2 in 10 innings. The Giants shut out.
Afternoon, sir. Mark? Was it a nice service?
Yes.
Was the president there?
Oh, yes.
Mark?
This is the first solid piece of evidence I've ever had that there is a God in heaven.
I can't help but think that Vincent's successor will be better for us.
The devil you know is better than the devil you don't know.
I watched General Eisenhower testify in Congress against desegregating the Army below the platoon level. I don't think President Eisenhower is going to be looking for a civil rights Chief Justice.
I still say the odds are we get someone less wedded to the past than Vincent.
Time says Eisenhower may promote Justice Jackson to the Senate seat and name an associate in his place.
The Republicans in the Senate will fry Ike if he tries to put a Democrat in the top spot. Anyway, whoever it's going to be, we got a ton of work to do. It's nearly midnight, so let's get to it.
My spies tell me Foster Dulles can have it, if he wants it. Second choice, New York's own, Governor Tom Dewey.
Were I you, John, I should fire my spies. I have it on good authority. And by good authority, I mean 15 feet from the Oval Office, that Ike made a deal at the Republican convention. In return for delivering California, the first vacancy on the Supreme Court goes to California's governor.
I'm afraid you were right.
For once, Greenberg?
New Chief Justice is the same man who uprooted 80,000 Japanese Americans during the war, confiscated their property, and sent them to internment camps.
What was it that a great man once said?
The devil you know.
Right.
Boys, we've got to do what we've got to do. We've got to find something in the history that says we are right. Get Kelly, Ming, and the others on 18-hour shifts. We are not going to be sitting around worrying about who's sitting on the bench. Get back to it.
So far, nothing appears to pose a problem for our position. But, Mr. Davis, if I may ask, how does Governor Warren going on the court affect things?
The Post describes him as the colorless manager of a team of all-stars.
I would think very little, Mr. Straight. Separate but equal has been upheld by the court 7 times. And the fact there is a division within the court should work to our advantage. There will be a great reluctance to overturn such an historic precedent on a close vote. Those men do not wish to create chaos.
Comes down to the fact that the man is a politician, not a jurist. He has never before sat on the bench, not even 5 minutes on a police court. No judicial philosophy.
I'll get you settled in, Mr. Chief Justice.
I'm going to need all the help I can get, I assure you. And your name?
Patterson, sir.
How do you do, Mr. Patterson?
Sir.
In California, I had 8,000 people working for me. This'll be different.
We have studied the history. The Declaration of Independence had glowing language proclaiming that all men are created equal with the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the authors of the Constitution included no such statement, a concession to the fact that our young republic tolerated human slavery. At the end of the Civil War, Congress passed the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, but it gave slaves no specific rights. Civil Rights Act of 1866 followed, and it was the cornerstone to the 14th Amendment. We have probed the records, and frankly, we do not like what we find.
Civil Rights Act was written with a no discrimination clause, but Congress removed it before it was passed. And nowhere in the debates on the 14th Amendment do we find any statement that suggests that school segregation was an issue. We had hoped that abolitionist leaders like John Bingham and Thaddeus Stevens would have recorded their position on segregation in schools. Nothing.
That bears out our studies. See, public education was in its early stages. To the newly freed slaves, education of any sort would have seemed a major step forward.
We also have to face the fact that Congress set up segregated schools in the District of Columbia and has supported that practice up to this very day. All in all, it gives us very little in the way of favorable evidence to answer the justice's question about the intent of the 14th Amendment.
Al, isn't there some way we can shape this history to make our case?
I'm all for the cause, Bob. But I am an historian first.
But there's got to be some way to nail it down.
It's difficult to be precise about what people thought a century ago. So I think our strategy should be to bypass the court's question and argue this on broad humanitarian grounds. The fuel for the 14th Amendment was a spirit of idealism and a sense of justice. The amendment meant what it said. Equal protection. We believe we can win this by arguing the broad humanitarian approach. It is the moral position, and we are a moral nation.
Okay, let's write it up that way.
What gives? It'll never work. The broad humanitarian approach. Frankfurter will smell it in a second. He'll see it as evasive. It's too general, isn't it? It's a long shot.
Where's Kelly?
He's going back to Detroit, morning train.
Call him at the hotel. Try and catch him.
Just pay the ones that have to be paid.
That's what these are.
Can't we just hold on to them a week or so?
They'll turn the lights off again. We should talk to Thurgood. This has
Thurgood's
got to
waiting
be
for
dealt
these.
with. Marion? Marion, where are you going?
It's 6 o'clock. It's Saturday. I have a date and no paycheck for 3 weeks. Good night.
Don't you know what you're doing in there? Don't you?
I'm typing the same stuff over and over.
if that stuff doesn't get typed, what you're doing in there is helping to make history.
Good night. Thurgood, excuse me. I think the time has come for us to deal with this.
Alice, would you run downstairs and grab us some sandwiches, please? The beginning of this needs to be tighter, clearer.
What are you doing, Alice? Making history.
This is it!
Thaddeus Stevens.
Read it.
Thaddeus Stevens, in the debate on the floor of Congress when the amendment was first presented, where any state makes distinctions between different classes of individuals, Congress shall have the power to correct such discriminations and inequality.
No distinction would be tolerated in this purified republic but what rose from merit and conduct.
Place this in the front section of the brief. And send someone out for ice and bourbon. Mr. Kelly needs a drink. These infant appellants are asserting the most important claims that can be put forward by children. The claim to their full measure of the chance to learn and grow, and the inseparably connected but even more important claim to be treated as entire citizens of the society into which they have been born. You understand? Professor, you are a Negro. Honey, this is too tough a trip for you. I'll be back in a couple of days. You'll be better off here.
I will be in that courtroom on Tuesday morning.
New hat? It's pretty.
It is the hat I wore last year at the first Supreme Court argument.
I hope it's the luckier hat this year.
In Clarendon School District Number 1 in South Carolina, there are 2,799 registered Negro children of school age. There are 295 white children. The state has now provided those 2,800 Negro children with schools that are, as Mr. Marshall has so positively admitted, equal in every respect. In fact, because of their being newer, they may even be better than the schools of the 295 white children. Now, who's going to disturb that situation? If these children were to be reassorted on a mathematical basis, you would have 27 Negro children and 3 white children in each schoolroom. Would that make the children any happier? Would they learn more quickly? Your Honors cannot sit as a glorified Board of Education for the state of South Carolina or any other state. Nor, I respectfully submit, can this court sit in the chairs of the legislature of South Carolina and mold its educational system. The state establishes the schools. It pays the funds. And it has the sole power to educate its citizens. The state of South Carolina does not come here in sackcloth and ashes. Its laws do not offend the Constitution of the United States. It is convinced that the happiness, the progress, and the welfare of these children is best promoted in segregated schools. And it would be 1,000 pities that by this controversy, it might be ordered to abandon what it has created. I am reminded of Aesop's fable of the dog and the meat. The dog, with a fine piece of meat in his mouth, crossed a bridge. He saw the shadow in the stream and he plunged for it. And he lost both the shadow and the substance. Now here is equal education, not prophesied, but present. Shall it be thrown away on some fancied question of racial prestige? It is not my part to offer advice to the appellants, and certainly not to the learned counsel. No doubt they think what they propose is best, but I entreat them to remember the age-old motto that the best is often the enemy of the good.
Mr. Marshall, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
May it please the court. The 14th Amendment was put into our Constitution after one of the worst wars ever fought. The duty of enforcing the 14th Amendment is placed upon this court to make sure that the states, in administering their functions, disregard little pet feelings about race. The Negroes who are forced to submit to segregation are all American citizens who, by accident of birth, are a different color. And the color makes no difference one way or another insofar as this court is concerned. Harry Briggs Jr. is guaranteed by the state some 12 years of education. There is no way you can repay lost school years. But they say, leave it to the states until they work it out. I got the feeling, on hearing the discussion earlier, that when you put a white child in a school with a whole lot of colored children, the child would fall apart. Everyone knows that is not true. Those same kids in Virginia and South Carolina, and I have seen them do it. They play in the streets together. They separate to go to school. They come out of school and play ball together. But they have to be separated in school. There must be some magic to it. You can have them going to the same state university and to the same college, but if they go to elementary and high school together, the world will fall apart. The only way that this court can decide this case in opposition to our position is to find some reason which gives the state the right to make a classification in regards to Negroes that they can make in regard to nothing else. And we submit the only way to arrive at this decision is to find that for some reason, Negroes are inferior to all other human beings. Nobody will stand in this court and say that because they would have to justify it. It can only be one thing. An inherent determination that the people who were formerly in slavery shall be kept as near that condition as is possible. Now is the time. We submit that this court should make it clear that that is not what the Constitution of the United States stands for. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
They're good.
Crab soup.
Oh, I know it's crab soup. Hot. Mm. And good. Very good, very good.
We can cede Douglas and Black to the other side. Now, Reed and Clark should vote with us. Jackson and Frankfurter are leaning towards our point of view. It's judicial restraint. Now, that's 4. And we should pick up another vote from Minton or from Burton or from Chief Justice Warren.
How are you getting on with the new chief?
I've discovered that he listens, though he is untutored in the law.
Well, it could be argued that's an ideal combination for a Chief Justice. Open-minded and flexible. Well, I hope you all get down to it. It's not that tough a call, as I see it.
For those who do not have to decide, it is easy. The humanitarian thing to do is to strike down segregation. But nothing presented to us, neither history nor legal precedent, offers any help. I think Jackson wants to toss it to Congress. The authority for enforcing the 14th Amendment...
Sir, if I may, the Negroes are the group for whom the 14th Amendment was written. It's for their protection, and since 1868, everybody else has come to this court invoking the protection of the 14th Amendment. Corporations and Chinese and aliens and everybody else come in and claim they've been denied equal protection of the laws. They come to the Supreme Court of the United States, and you listen to them. And if you find that their rights have been violated, then you take care of them. But when the one group for whose protection the 14th Amendment was written, the Negroes, come in and ask you for relief, Jackson wants you to say yes. Your constitutional rights have been violated, but don't come to us. You go across the street, you ask Congress to give you relief. We're not going to give you a damn thing.
Mark. At Harvard, I would have given you an A for that.
Tempus fugit. I'm exactly where I was 1 year ago. I'm prepared to vote to desegregate. And if my vote should be in the minority, I shall write as strong a dissent as I know how.
After reading over 1,500 pages, I have yet to discover a basis in the Constitution or the 14th Amendment that allows us to order the states to do with their schools that which they do not wish to do.
Well, I was very taken by something Mr. Thurgood Marshall said. The only way the court can decide this case in opposition to our position is to find that for some reason Negroes are inferior to all other human beings.
Hugo, I base my view on the law, and nothing in the law tells us that we can tell South Carolina to abolish separate schools. This country has been making great strides in race relations. A careless decision here could halt that progress.
How do you see that happening, Stanley?
If the American people feel that a bunch of liberals in Washington are forcing their social views on the states, there will be profound resentment.
I've seen the race problem more closely than most of you. I'm concerned about the possibility of violence, massive resistance. What if we say desegregate and they refuse? Can we send the Army into South Carolina to enforce it? Send the Army into 20 states?
I am surprised that the history provides so little in the way of legal footing for striking down segregation.
I find I'm arguing with myself. My heart tells me segregation is wrong. The law tells me not to interfere with the states.
I do not like the idea of segregation, but for 100 years, the South has had segregated school systems, and this court has told them it was legal. We can't just turn on a dime and say tomorrow morning things will be different.
Nor can we continue to say that in the United States of America, all men are equal, but that white men are more equal than others. For God's sake, let's decide the principle. We can remain flexible on how to implement it.
Disaster. This court is expected to be precise and clear.
Felix, you say you're arguing with yourself. Perhaps you'd prepare a memorandum outlining the issues and offering some suggestions as to where our choices lie. Thank you, gentlemen.
Our great civil libertarian is going to get us in the soup. Douglas is so abrasive. He makes conciliation and compromise even more difficult.
He obviously feels very deeply.
Douglas is a great humanitarian in the abstract. He just can't stand people.
Almost ready.
Sir, these will be better than your city shoes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Patterson. You know the roads, Mr. Patterson?
Oh, yes, sir. I've been out this way many times before. The war between the states is one of my hobbies. Manassas, Bull Run, just a short drive from the city. You ever been to Gettysburg before, sir?
No, no. For me, one of the pleasures of living in the East will be to see some of these things.
Little Round Top. Meade had the high ground. He had the artillery, too. That was the whole story. In the winter of 1944 in Italy, we were pinned down in the Serchio Valley for 2 weeks. Jerry's had the hilltop. They were pouring their 88s down in on us. Flooded us real bad. Taught me a whole lot about the value of high ground.
So simple, yet so strong. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us. That from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
On to Manassas, sir?
Good morning, sir.
Mr. Patterson, why are you sleeping in there?
Sir, I couldn't find a place. Sir, there's no place within 20 miles of here where I...
Let's get back to Washington. To be treated as entire citizens of the society into which they've been born.
Come in, Mark.
It's Earl Warren.
Earl.
Felix. Felix, this court must vote to desegregate. I believe that this is a moral issue, one that goes deep into the soul of our nation. The more I ponder this, the more I believe the separate but equal idea is based on the concept that the colored race is inferior, and that those who sustain it must be willing to acknowledge that. Now, I believe my vote will make a majority of 5. I will assign the writing of the opinion to myself. I hope to write it in a way that will bring others with me. What do I have to do to have you with me?
You're a man from the hurly-burly of public life, Earl. I'm a man from the private world of the jurist. We both know what is right here, but to you it seems less complicated. Neither history nor legal precedent gives us reason. But there are times when the court must be free to interpret the Constitution based on the changes in men's feeling for what is right and just. The humanitarian goal will have to do. But if you force a sharply divided decision, you will have accomplished no good. You must work to unite the court.
How, Felix?
Jackson, you must persuade him to vote with us and not to write a separate opinion. You must talk to him, convince him, and then, if you're successful, Clark, you should follow. Stanley Reed will be the most difficult.
Can Reed be turned?
Only by you, but Jackson first.
If you write an opinion, I will study it with an open mind.
That's all I ask.
But an open mind cannot change my belief that this matter rightfully belongs to the Congress. Earl, You are looking for a congenial political solution to the problem.
I'm looking for a way to do what I think we both believe is the right thing to do.
The only possible way, in my view, to write a decision to end segregation with intellectual honesty is to argue that the majestic generalities of the Constitution have a content and a significance that vary from age to age.
Yes?
I don't like it, but you can try it.
I like this. I've got control. With the courts, all I can do is wait.
Buster, the time I got the job as a waiter with the Baltimore in Ohio,
Your daddy got you that job.
they handed me a uniform. White coat, black pants that fit real nice, except they stopped just above the ankles, 6 inches too short. I went to the man in charge and I said, "Sir, I need to have another pair of pants. These are too short." The man looked me over and you know what he said? He said, "Don't you know it's easier for me to get a shorter Negro than it is to get another uniform?"
It makes me angry.
That was a long time ago.
Mm-mm. I mean about being sick. Changes are coming. Changes we never dared dream about. And I may not see them. I want to see the things we've worked for. All the changes that will come.
You'll see changes. You will see a different world. And you know something? You'll know we made a difference.
Douglas, Black, Minton, Burton, Warren, Frankfurter, Jackson, Clark, and Reed. Miss McHugh, Mr. Patterson, work to do. Now, if you would type this, please.
Yes, sir.
I will review it. And then, Mr. Patterson, if you would take it to the print shop and order 9 copies. Only 9.
Yes, sir.
May I guess why you're here? I will vote to desegregate. If the opinion gives the southern states time. We are not dealing just with law, we are dealing with a social revolution. It needs time.
You read that, Tom. It may need some refinement. I'd like to accommodate your view. Stanley, I've written this opinion in a way which I hope will unite the court.
There is a word that's been on my mind of late. Cryptocracy. K-R-Y-T-O-C-R-A-C-Y. I checked it last night in the Oxford Dictionary. It says government by judges. I do not want to see this court travel outside its authority. It isn't a question of what I would like to say, but what the Constitution will permit me to say. And Earl, understand this. I do not believe that Negroes are an inferior race.
Sir, it's Mr. Justice Jackson.
Yes?
Sir, they just took him to Walter Reed. A heart attack, sir.
Mr. Justice Jackson, I'm Earl Warren.
Sir, he's resting. Mr. Prettyman is handling his calls.
Oh, hello, Barrett.
Hello, Mr. Chief Justice. They say he'll make it. I talked to him this morning. I think he'll be okay.
Good. Barrett, as soon as you think he's up to it, ask him to read this. It's important.
I know, sir.
A little bout with one's mortality as a way of focusing the mind. Since the end of the Civil War, the United States has been hesitating between two worlds. One dead, the other powerless to be born. What you have written is quite remarkable. In very plain and understandable words, it tells the nation what must be done and why. I'm with you, Earl.
You're all by yourself now, Stanley.
The fact remains, this court has been given no evidence that the nation knew a century ago that it was outlawing separate
Stanley, we
schools.
have 8 votes to desegregate. Each of us is concerned about history. Each of us is reluctant to overrule precedents. But we are convinced that the law in this day and age cannot set Negro school children apart. Not in the United States of America.
This country has been making consistent progress in race relations. This decision could impede that progress, halt the march. A piece of paper cannot eradicate the fears and prides and prejudices of the people. Earl, if this court tries to force the southern states to change overnight, there will be resistance, litigation, disobedience, and years of conflict. Believe me.
Stanley, I'm a politician. I've worked for the people for over 30 years now. I've seen them in police stations, hospitals, unemployment lines. I'm convinced that the people will accept a ruling that fortifies their inner conscience. Let the backbone come from the court, and it'll strengthen the moral backbone of the people who live in conflict. Stanley, a fully united court will send a signal to this nation. I pray that you'll see your way clear to join the majority.
Hello? I'll be on the midnight train.
Find another cab, boy. We're going to the Supreme Court.
Come on, Bob, come on.
I think you'll want to be in court this morning, boys.
Nine copies, sir, for the brethren.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. It's good to have you back with us.
All rise. The Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Oyez, oyez, oyez. All persons having business before the Honorable, the Supreme Court of the United States are invited to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting.
These cases come to us from the states of Kansas, South Carolina, Virginia, and Delaware. They are premised on different facts and different local conditions, but a common legal question justifies their consideration together. In approaching this question, we cannot turn the clock back to 1868, when the 14th Amendment was adopted, or even to 1896, when Plessy versus Ferguson was written. We must consider public education in the light of its present place in American life. Only in this way can it be determined if segregation in public schools deprives these young plaintiffs of the equal protection of the laws. In these days, it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied the opportunity of an education. Such an opportunity, where the state has undertaken to provide it, is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. We come then to the question presented. Does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities may be equal, deprive the children of the minority group of equal education opportunities? We believe unanimously that it does. We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Therefore, we hold that the plaintiffs and others similarly situated, for whom the actions have been brought, are, by reason of the segregation complained of, deprived of the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. It is so ordered.
Buster, it's me. We did it. Unanimous. Buster, I love you.
A bulletin from CBS At 1:10 p.m., the United States Supreme Court, Chief Justice Earl Warren announced the unanimous decision to outlaw segregation of Negroes in public schools. The court said separating Negro children violates rights guaranteed them as American citizens by the 14th Amendment.
Father?
Morning, Julia.
The decision for the plaintiffs. It was unanimous.
In the words of the general, we have met the enemy, and we are theirs.
I'm sorry, Father.
Someday I'm going to learn to accept good advice when it's offered. It's troubled times ahead. But looking at it philosophically, unanimous decision is the best thing for the country.
1967, Thurgood Marshall was named Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Vivian Buster Marshall died of cancer the year following the Supreme Court decision. Harry Briggs Jr. never attended a desegregated school and never had an opportunity to go to college. This film is dedicated to the lawyers of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund who devoted their lives to the struggle for equal opportunity in America.